Everybody's on? I would like to call the regular council meeting of Cumberland Council to order for August the 8th. And we are honored to gather on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. And before we go into the agenda, I would like to just comment on yesterday. I was in contact with the RCMP twice during the day, and they asked council not to make any public announcements because they didn't want people that were not in the area to come up and be part of the process. I would like to commend the people on Kendall and the surrounding area for following the direction of the RCMP. And we were very fortunate that the RCMP did their job and nobody was hurt. So I would like to thank them for that. So, and remember, it is a family that lives in the community and they need our support. So thank you. Agenda.
Move approval.
All in favor? Carried. Minutes.
The minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. And the committee member minutes. Someone like to move the committee member?
Move receipt of committee minutes.
Second.
Second, I just wanted to raise something from the advisory planning, the APC, the 14th minutes has recommendations around the modernization process that I appreciated, and also some additional comments about the APC and the APC role, which I believe is part of the modernization conversation. So I just want to make sure we're integrating those somehow into the next step
Absolutely,
of the modernization.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. No delegations. Correspondence. That council received the correspondence from a resident regarding BC speculation tax.
Receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. I went online to look at the speculation tax because I heard that the rest of the areas in the Comox Valley were interested in doing this also, bringing this forward. And it was imposed by the provincial government in 2018, and it's that the rationale for the law makers is that foreign and domestic speculations, people that hold vacant properties in major urban centers have contributed to the runaway real estate prices that make it difficult for many British Columbians to afford a home. Further, it is believed that the speculation tax will provide an incentive for people who own multiple properties to rent those houses out to long-time residents. And that's what the tax is. And there's 5 areas in British Columbia that are doing this, and and if you look at them, it is regional district areas are most of them, and it's most of the municipalities in those areas. So if we would consider doing this, then the 3 municipalities and the regional district would have to take this on and lobby for that to happen here in this community, our communities. So is there any other questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I think this is not just appropriate for larger urban centers, but we are also experiencing vacant homes in this community, and so I think it's worth us looking into. And I also understand from a tiny bit of research that they are in favor of adding it for adjacent communities. So because North Cowichan just got it, it might be nice for our region to look at it next.
Yes, Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, so it started in Victoria, and so the Cowichan Valley was feeling like having the speculation tax there was pushing people to buy outside of Victoria and into the Cowichan Valley area. So the mayors, Lady Smith and North Cowichan, got together and lobbied the provincial government to apply the tax there. Really, it should be province-wide, but it's not. So you have to ask for it to be applied. So, I did talk to the mayor of Courtenay as well, who is interested in having it because it really is. It is a vacant home tax, right? And so getting rid of those homes that are just standing idle and open when we are in a housing crisis is pretty important. And it also, moves us away from the commodification of housing. So I think it's important to look at that, and hopefully the province will agree and apply it in this area as well.
Any other comments or questions? No? So someone like to move the motion?
I'll move that council direct staff to bring forward a report on the BC speculation tax.
Second.
Second. We'll start there, and I'll have further discussions with Mayor Wells, and we will do the process.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you very much.
All in favor?
Yeah. We'll get there. Okay, next we have no unfinished business reports. That council received the development permit and development variance permit 3284 2nd Street report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. So this development permit and development variance permit application for 3284 2nd Street is back before you after review by the Advisory Planning Commission. The APC reviewed the application and has recommended approval of all variances, with the exception of the increase to the gross floor area of an accessory dwelling unit. Regarding parking, the APC shared that they believe one parking space per suite is sufficient instead of one parking space per bedroom, as guests arriving in one suite are likely to arrive in one vehicle. The APC also recommended approval of the shipping container on the property and its current setbacks. To address concerns expressed by neighbors, staff would like to recommend that the shipping container variance be approved subject to the installation of cladding to reflect the character of the primary dwelling. And that's it.
Questions from members of council? Councillor Kettler?
Yeah. So I looked at the recommendations from committees, and I don't really agree with allowing the shipping container. It was moved there before we had a bylaw about shipping containers, but also without knowledge that it took away 3 parking spots on that property. So the village didn't know about the shipping container, and they didn't know that the parking had been removed from that property. And so other permits that were issued for that property in the village's mind were issued with those parking spaces there. And they are still asking for a reduction in the number of parking spaces. And I feel that if we remove the shipping container, those parking spaces would then be available again. So it would be both complying with our bylaw because we no longer allow shipping containers, and with the parking requirements for that vacation rental. So most of the other recommendations I do agree with, though. It's just that one with the shipping container that I don't.
Okay. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, this is particularly challenging because we have just introduced a regulation around vacation rentals. And so I understand that this has been operating for a long time, and it's a very, it's an excellent addition to our short-term rental situation in the village, and it's highly used. But it's hard to allow, first of all, as far as I can tell, there are at least 4 suites, if not 5. 2 of them don't have full kitchens, so I guess that's how they're not considered suites. But we've just brought in regulation that only allows 1 per residential property. And we are, after we've, just prior to approving that regulation, are about to approve 4 on 1 property at minimum. And so I struggle with that. I also struggle with still continue to be confused about how this is, aside from the variances, how this fits into the R1A zone when we only allow 3 dwellings per lot in the R1A zone, and this one has at least 4 or 5. So to me, it's a commercial use. It's a hotel because it has more than what we allow for short-term vacation rentals. I appreciate the work that has gone into trying to make this property work. And so, and then the other observation I'm making through this process is that it is a beautiful piece of property, and it's beautiful and accommodating to those visitors because they've externalized the costs of that business onto the public by not having any parking on the property. So that the neighborhood is expected to facilitate the need for parking, which is obviously a need because they're travelers coming to stay here. They're not walking or biking. So that to me is a concern. And again, we don't allow shipping containers, so why allow this one, and then how do we say no to the next one because we said yes to this one? So are we indicating that we are interested in changing that bylaw and allowing shipping containers? Those are my initial thoughts. So my first question is, how does it fit into the R1A? The second question is the D, D on page 36 of 430, says increase the gross floor area to the secondary suite as a percentage of the primary residence. But what is the residence when it's all residences? So that's also confusing to me. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I'm just processing. In terms of the fitting into the R1A, so this business license was accepted under the zoning bylaw before the freeze on the accessory dwelling unit application. So it's being viewed under that bylaw, which did permit entire properties to be rented as Airbnb uses. So it does fit under R1A in that sense. Sorry, could you repeat the second question?
So in R1A, we allow 3 dwellings.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes,
yeah.
The 2 units below. So those aren't considered separate dwelling units. Building code doesn't require an internal connection for those to be considered part of the dwelling. And they're technically not dwelling units because they don't have kitchen facilities. Yeah, so it's partly a building code thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then the other question was which residence is the primary residence?
Yeah.
What are we
The
referring?
primary residence was the original one facing Penrith. So the main 2-story, well, I guess they're both 2-story, the larger of the 2 closest to Penrith. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Sproul?
Well, I think, I'm definitely concerned about the shipping container so will they be required, even because it was placed there at a time when shipping containers seem to be allowed, will they have to move this? Oh, it's up to us.
So it was placed when shipping containers were permitted, but the previous owners of the property didn't follow the setback requirements. Therefore, it's not considered legal nonconforming. It just would have been nonconforming. So yes, it would have to be removed. Yeah, if the shipping container use itself was not approved. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely share the concerns of the other councillors. As far as the shipping container is concerned, I am sympathetic to the business needs for the bikes and stuff. I find that does make sense. Yeah, it's good that these come up one at a time because I don't think we'll have any problems with shipping containers in the future, especially because it's now illegal. So I don't have a problem grandfathering that, although I do share Councillor Kettler's concern about the original intent of that and taking away parking from that. So I don't know what to do with that. Yeah, and anytime there's a reduction of parking, it's always very difficult to think about, especially with the situation I just mentioned. So those are my concerns. However, I do, I'll allow the shipping container, sorry. And that's just what I have right now.
Okay. Thank you. I have no real concerns. I think that the traffic is one, and the parking is an issue, and especially the large trucks with the bike carriers on the back. And sometimes when you're on there, it is really hard to get through, and you're down to one lane and I think about emergency vehicles and going through there, and it could be a challenge for them. So if they could park those in a different location other than off of Second Street, that would be really good. I would really like to see that happen. Other than that, I don't have anything. It's a beautiful area. I don't think we've ever had any complaints about it. The visitors or anything like that. It's a very quiet neighborhood as far as I know. So what is council's pleasure?
Well,
Are we gonna go one at a time, or each letter at a time, I mean?
Yeah, we could do each letter at the time, at a time, maybe.
If that's what you would like to have happen, so somebody want to start it.
I can move that council approve allowing the accessory dwelling unit to be attached to the dwelling unit with a deck.
second.
All in favor? Carried.
And then I'll move that the increase in the height of the accessory dwelling unit to a maximum of 7.6 meters.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
And C, the secondary suite is help me out.
So the secondary,
garage?
no, it's
No.
the downstairs of the original house,
Okay.
facing Penrith, one closest to Penrith.
Okay, so I'll move that we increase the gross floor area of the secondary suite to a maximum of 100.8 meters squared.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
And
Sorry, Councillor Brown, did you raise, you made the motion, are you
I did,
supporting?
yeah.
Are you supporting? You didn't raise your hand?
oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Yes.
And just to be clear, none of these, like the gross floor area and increasing the percentage of residents to 50%, these buildings are already in place. We're just
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been on the property since at least 2005.
So
yeah,
we're just
as
allowing
is.
them to be
Legal.
They're,
code, yeah,
they're
to be
trying to bring them
legal,
into
yeah.
compliance. Yeah, exactly.
And so the second gross floor area, where is that?
So that's the
Under D.
Yeah. D. So that is so that you have, with secondary suites, same as with ADUs, there's the max gross floor area and then also the percentage distribution max.
Right.
Yeah. So
okay.
they're same suite, but the two parts of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll move that we increase the gross floor area of the secondary suite as a percentage of the residents to 50%.
Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
And I'm not sure about the next one. So the next one is reducing the number of parking spaces required for vacation rental from 7 to 5. I understand the APC is in favor of one per suite. That's not what the short-term rental bylaw is going to require unless we change it. That's possible. But I have a vacation rental across the street from me, and it's one unit, and there are very often 4 cars there for that one unit. So I just...
Are you making the motion, or are you?
No, I'm happy for someone else to take over if you'd like.
Yes.
I think you're doing good.
I will make that motion because I will be not supporting the shipping container, which hopefully would allow them to put 3 more spaces back onto the property itself.
Okay. So you're making the
Yeah.
motion for
The
E.
motion to reduce the number of parking spaces required for the vacation rental from 7 to 5.
Okay.
Seconder?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Carried. Next.
That's it for me.
I'll move to allow a shipping container on the lot subject to installation of cladding to reflect the character of the primary dwelling.
Seconder.
I'll second it so I can speak to it.
Okay.
So I noticed that there is between the building and the neighboring residential lot, there is quite a lot of space down the side of the building, where I feel secure bike storage could be moved to. I understand that creates more work and issues for the property owner, but it would bring it into compliance, remove the need for the variances on the shipping container, and remove the shipping container. And I feel like that's a good compromise, and I do feel like there is room on the property for secure bike storage elsewhere.
Okay. So your motion is?
So Councillor Sullivan's made the motion.
Okay.
So-
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next.
Well, now that we have the shipping container, I'll move that we reduce the rear setback on the shipping container from 1.5 to from 1.5 to 0.6.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Opposed?
Opposed? Carried.
I'll move to reduce the exterior side setback of the shipping container from 3.0 meters to 0.3 meters.
Seconder.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed?
Opposed.
Yes. Carried. Okay. The next one?
That council deny the application for a development variance permit for the property described as Lot 1, Block 5, District Lot 21, Nelson District, Plan 5223284 2nd Street, to increase the gross floor area of the accessory dwelling unit to a maximum of 133.8 meters squared.
Seconder?
Second.
Can I ask a question? So these buildings, as we established, are already built, so then if we deny this, how
So-
is this resolved?
So the proposed ADU was approved as an addition to the primary dwelling originally. So the applicant is hoping to convert it into an ADU to allow for a third kitchen on the property. So by converting it into an ADU, then you can have another kitchen.
So then it would create another unit, another rental unit.
Instead of being an addition, it would be an accessory dwelling unit, essentially. Yeah.
I just want to clarify something, with your permission. I think that this one here, this last one, that's about the increasing the size of the ADU. So it means that the downstairs, they couldn't get building
sorry,
permits
yeah.
to convert them to living space.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes. Thank
So
you.
You're asking council to deny.
Yes.
So then to be clear, so then they couldn't use this as an ADU now, is that?
They could use it as an ADU, but it would have to meet the maximum GFA requirements for an accessory dwelling unit in that zone. So they're asking for a variance to make it 1,400 square feet, but the max is the 900 and something. So they still technically, it just provides options. So they could still have an ADU potentially with that extra kitchen, but they wouldn't be able to use the main floor as living space. So it'd have to meet the GFA max. Or, if they decided they could withdraw their DP and keep it as an addition, but not have an additional kitchen in it. So it's presenting sort of a few more options for the applicant to work with.
Okay. So the motion was made and seconded? Somebody second that motion to deny?
I think
I thought, did you?
I may have. I don't remember.
Yeah, okay. So all in favor? Opposed?
Opposed.
Carried. Okay. That's it.
There's also item 2, that the approval of the ADU, sorry, point 2, the DP application as well. That was before the variances actually, that got missed there.
That council approve the application for a development permit for the property described as Lot 1, Block 5, District Lot 21, Nelson District, Plan 522, 3284 2nd Street? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
Next, that's it on that one.
Yep.
Okay, next we have that council received the development variance permit 2688 Penrith Avenue report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
All right, so 2688 Penrith Avenue. The purpose of this report is to seek council decision on an application for a variance permit to vary the minimum required parking spaces for daycare use in the public assembly institutional zone. This also just came back from the Advisory Planning Commission, who reviewed the application, and the APC has recommended approval of the development variance permit.
Any questions from council members? What is your pleasure?
I'll move that council approve the development variance permit to vary the required number of parking spaces from 5 to 1 for a childcare program on the property described as Lot 1, Block 4, District Lot 21, Nelson District, Plan 522, 2688 Penrith Avenue.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next, that council received the development variance permit 4640 Cumberland Road report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
All right, so the purpose of this report, 4640 Cumberland Road, is to seek council decision on an application for a variance permit. The applicant is proposing to vary the side setback on the northeast side of the property from 7.5 meters to 3 meters for a new industrial warehouse building. This will accommodate on-site parking and driveway access in the center of the lot. And this application is just for development variance permit. Just a reminder that a development permit would also be required before a building permit would be issued. The Advisory Planning Commission also reviewed this at the last meeting, and APC has also recommended approval of this variance.
Questions? Councillor Brown?
Yeah, so just maybe what the intention of setbacks are in industrial areas. I presume that it's about conflicting interests or implications on the properties, but this is industrial to industrial. So
Yeah.
is there something else I should be thinking about in that setback? Like, there's a letter regarding fire access, is that?
I did review the application with the fire department,
Okay.
and there's no concern there.
Okay.
Yeah.
great.
So it was the adjacent property, though, that submitted the letter and asked for maybe 0.3 of a meter difference? or
Well, they just thought that half would be fair of just what they were asking for. Just,
And so why wouldn't we want to accommodate the neighbor?
I mean, definitely take it into consideration, but that 0.5 of a meter, just, there wasn't a specific reason behind it. It was just a general concern. And then looking at like the site plan that's been done by designer with the turnaround for traffic and parking lengths, like the 0.5 does make a big difference for the potential development. So yeah, staff would recommend the requested 3 meters as opposed to a 3.5.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, I'll move the council approve the development variance permit to reduce the east side setback from 7.5 meters to 3 meters for a new industrial warehouse on the property described Lot 1, Section 25, Township 10, Comox District, Plan 35738, 4640 Cumberland Road.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next, that council receive the development variance permit 3264 Fifth Street report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
All right, last one for me this evening. So 3264 Fifth Street, the village received an application for a development variance permit. The applicant is proposing to vary the rear setback from 4.5 meters to as close as 4.3 meters. to accommodate for an error made in measurement when the foundation of a single-family home was poured. The subject property currently has an active building permit and meets all other zoning requirements for the R1A zone. Reducing the rear setback from 4.5 meters to as close as 4.3 will allow for the applicant to continue constructing the single-family dwelling without having to remove the foundation and subsequent framing. The removal and repour of the foundation would have significant financial impact for the applicant and also result in waste concrete and other building materials. Staff don't identify any aesthetic, functional, or environmental impacts and consider this to be a minor variance.
Councillor Brown?
Just confirming that the rear, which,
Yeah, so this property was recently subdivided in the last year. And the frontage for this is on 5th Street.
okay, so the rear is.
The rear is the neighboring side yard.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'll move that council approve the development variance permit to reduce the rear setback from 4.5 to as close as 4.3 for a single-family dwelling on the property described as Lot A, District Lot 21, Nelson District Plan, EPP 107936, 3264 5th Street.
Second.
Now, all in favor? Carried. Okay, that council receive the development variance and heritage alteration permit amendment application 2714 Dunsmuir Avenue for referral report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This application is an amendment to a heritage alteration permit that was granted last year, actually probably around this time or in September. And the applicant is seeking to amend the permit. This is for the Cumberland Hotel property. And the principal reason for the amendment application is to be able to observe the setback required from the overhead power line to the building facade, which is basically requires a 3-meter setback. And that came up through the development process for the applicant. And the current and the zoning bylaw maximum setback, front setback, is 1 meter. So they need a little bit more room. So they wish to set the building back further. And then the process of going through that process of redesigning to set it back further and apply for the variance, they also redesigned the building to add a few more units to make it more viable. And then they also looked at the parking again. They have a new architecture firm involved, so they're able now to meet the parking requirements. So in the setback itself, the request for setback is to be able to move the building, the facade of the building fronting Dunsmuir Avenue back by that 1.06 meters, so be a total setback of 2.06 meters from the front. For only that portion of the facade that's right close to the corner. So if you look at the drawings, they provided some really good drawings which shows the initial request and then now the amendment request. So the visuals show that the front corner would be set back from Dunsmuir Avenue a little bit more if the variance is granted. And then in terms of the redesign of the remainder of the building, there was some changes proposed to the cladding material, and partly is to less combustibility of that material. Also to just streamline the design a little bit more. There was quite a few different building materials, so we have samples that we would show the Heritage Committee if it's the application is referred to the Heritage Committee. So some changes in the facade material. And the addition that's been made to the building of the additional units, a couple more units per floor, are all in the back. And it actually provides a friendlier face to the lane because there's windows on that side now that face the lane. So when you look at the drawings, they show 360 drawings, so you can see really well what is proposed. And the cladding material on that is cotton steel, which is kind of the rusted steel look, which is a fairly Yeah, I think those are the key ones. The other thing I want to draw your attention to, yes, so with the parking requirements, they can meet all of them on site now with an underground parkade. They can meet the electric vehicle a requirement for one dedicated electric vehicle charging station, and then we're in discussion with them to provide the capability of adding chargers to all of the parking lots. In the underground garage. The bike locker, they revised the common bike storage area to provide bike lockers for each unit. So it'd be now a bike locker that accommodates 2 bikes for each unit, which is more secure storage for the individual units. And then a fairly generous 11-stall bike rack in the middle of the courtyard of the building for employees or visitors to the residential units. The previous design had a rooftop area that was quite large because it also included a hallway to connect the mechanical room to the elevator shaft, and that's been eliminated, so it's a little bit less up top, which we might not have seen from the floor, from the street level anyways, but that's one other change. And then the window material, so there's a specific request to change the window material from aluminum to black vinyl. So our heritage alteration guidelines state that the windows should not be vinyl, very specifically. For old buildings, that's particularly important because wood frame windows are part of the character of the building. For new buildings, we have permitted previous applicants have vinyl windows on the top floors because it's not so visible from street level. So they would still have the aluminum windows on the ground floor to the commercial units, and then vinyl, black tinted vinyl on the upper floors. And then there are some changes to the landscaping. So there was some landscaping that was actually provided that was actually in the private areas off some of the balconies. So that's been eliminated because there's really you can't have control over that. But there's been landscaping added on 2nd Street towards the entrance. There's sort of a little reflection pool now. There's 2 patios now. One is a bit lower and one is a bit higher to the commercial unit, and that's to accommodate the entrance to the garage. And there is landscaping provided as that. And then along Dunsmuir, there's planters. So those will all be part of the building permit process because they're considered part of the building. Yeah, at this point, staff is seeking a referral to the Heritage Committee to review the proposed changes, review the material changes, and before it would come back to council.
Any questions from council? Yes.
Yeah, I have some serious concern about the parking garage. So they proposed the elevator because my understanding was a parking garage would be difficult and expensive. I'm worried about there's no geotechnical report on here. I don't know if they've done testing at the site. Is it bedrock? Are they going to come back and ask for a blasting permit? There's a lot of things that I'm wondering about the new parkade that aren't in this report. And so I think before I would refer this to committee, I would want more information on the parkade and the engineering and geotechnical report of the parkade.
Mm-hmm. I can ask that they present and share that at the committee. They'll be attending the committee and answer questions of the committee, so I could ask them to be prepared to answer that question. I assume they did some feasibility around the parking, and the reason they went to the it was all project viability for them as well. So with additional units, an underground parkade is more feasible.
So do we know if they're going to come back for a blasting permit?
I will have to ask. It's quite possible that they would need to do some blasting. Yeah, it depends on the ground conditions.
And then with surrounding heritage buildings, is that also going to be an issue?
I'll ask that information. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll have to ask that information to be presented and shared with the Heritage Committee.
Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Sullivan, and then Councillor Brown.
I think it's my understanding that we let it get so high because of the elevator. So if there's no elevator, are they still asking for that height exemption?
So the elevator shafts protrusion above the maximum floor height is maximum building height is permitted in the zoning bylaw. What wasn't permitted, and they were granted a variance, was a sloped roof. So that was a design element, and it was partially, yes, to hide that elevator shaft, but it was also to provide a bit of a sloped roof, a bit more interest to the building, and mirror somewhat the building across the street, the big store, which has a sloped roof. The slope is different, but it's still it was a design element.
And I'll add my concern, like Councillor Kettler, it feels a little bit cart before the horse. It's a major change to not provide us with a little bit more info, I find. Major change. I don't know. That's my thoughts.
Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you. So interesting to have this come back. So I'm mostly happy with what is happening, particularly the provision of underground parking, because they'll be the first and they won't be the last. I'm just trying to figure out what it is we lost in terms of design, which I believe is the stepping back on Dunsmuir, that now that is all sort of set back. So that's my first question. And then my second question is they've added considerable lot coverage, and they had already asked for more lot coverage than we allow. So don't they need a variance for more lot coverage?
So they don't actually need a variance for lot coverage. Previously they needed one because the parkade that they had was actually part of lot coverage as per our zoning bylaw. Now they eliminated that parkade, but they expanded to push the building back to add those additional units. They're below lot coverage.
Okay, so
Just
they're
below or
the
just
78,
or just add
not
lot
the
coverage.
75.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then my other, so the step back, is that what we essentially lost in the design? And then, because the zero setback is a heritage feature of the downtown core, I am concerned about losing that. And I think I can see from the drawings something that makes no sense to me. So in the HAP amendment drawing on page 112, they're saying they need to set back the building, but they've set back the street level further than actually the area of the building that will run into the hydro line. So have they set back the entire building, or what is happening there?
Yeah, so I don't have page numbers on the paper copy, but the visuals where it says they
Yeah.
provided like really good, they provide contrasting drawings. So where it says visuals, the first page of that, the original design is on the left, the amendment, and it should say HAP, it says DP, but the amendment is on the right side. So you can see that the only thing that was set back was the corner unit, the corner portion of the building. There's now, which now makes the area above the commercial unit that's accessible from Dunsmuir, the second one, look like there's an overhang. Okay, so we did talk about that design element with them. The reason they kept that was to line up with the roof line of the adjacent two buildings, to carry through that roof line. And then visually, the balconies that are above, this hasn't changed. The balconies, the way they're set back, it hasn't changed. They were always recessed. I think these drawings just show that a little bit better. They're a bit more three-dimensional. So they've always been set back. So taking off that front portion there would then not line it up with the buildings adjacent to it, and that full building height would be more visible from the street level. So there was a design discussion around that, and at this point they presenting their proposal is to keep that continuity with the adjacent building. So only the corner facing Dunsmuir has been set back. Yeah.
Okay, because it looks like,
Because the power line's on the second floor, right? So
Yeah.
that the other or the third floor, I guess, about, so that they didn't need to set back that overhang over the commercial unit. If that makes sense. They didn't need to set that back because the power line is above that, because it was already set back once you above that mezzanine, I guess you could call it. Yeah.
Okay, so it's just the drawing that's confusing me then. And as long as we're not giving them the setback all the way across the block of Dunsmuir, that doesn't make sense. As long as we're not giving the setback from the corner of Dunsmuir all the way to the next building. That's what I'm trying to avoid. So yes, you can take the corner back so that you're not hitting the hydro pole, but then the rest of the building comes out to front at 0 because that's aligned with that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I'm looking at page 112, and they actually, where they have it set back, it looks like they've got tables and chairs set up. Is that for a restaurant facility, or so they could have a patio at the front of the building?
Yeah, I believe the old the old drawings showed tables and chairs, so we can't require them to have a cafe as a tenant or a restaurant. So that's may happen or may not happen. So actually, the area that's set back, the recess area from Dunsmuir, has been reduced a little bit in size, but then the patio to the rear is actually increased. That's accessible from that unit. So potentially, if there is an establishment that sells food or drinks or a cafe, they would have an internal patio that's private, and it's a bit higher than the public patio or the patio that the residents have access to because of the garage going down below.
The other one on page 114, I thought they were going to change the name because they're still saying it's the Eddy.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm sure this probably will come up at the Heritage Committee meeting as well. Right now they're showing that. So one of the we've had meetings with the museum that is facilitating the commemoration plan or framework for commemoration plan, which was one of the heritage alteration permit requirements and continues to be. We haven't changed that in the amended permit. And one of the discussions was the naming. So an initial meeting has been had between the museum and the Heritage Committee to discuss the elements of the commemoration plan. And the naming did come up again too. So we haven't seen the final plan yet. That is a condition of the heritage alteration permit to be presented before building permit. But we can get some more clarity as part of the next meeting at the Heritage Committee.
Okay, Councillor Sutherland?
Is the Cumberland the new name, or that's still up in the air?
I think the name actually the exact name has to be discussed.
Yeah.
That was discussed, the Cumberland. There's some other suggestions that have reference to previous owners or you know.
Okay. Sorry, I have one more question. So the commemoration stuff that the museum is working on, is that supposed to go in the entrance that they're asking to reduce in size? So when we discussed this with at the committee, there's so many ways. There was a desire to not just have a commemoration wall, which is one element, and the wall size is still the entrance was narrowed to allow more space and just make the entrances less confusing. There was 3 before. You can enter to the commercial unit, to the residential unit, to the elevator entrance. To the entrance to the elevator. It was really confusing, so they rationalized the entrance also just for clarity of access. But it also did free up some space. But the commemoration wall itself hasn't changed because that was always that wall. It's just that you don't have 3 entrances, so you try and figure out where you're going to go in front of that commemoration wall. Discussions, so we haven't seen a final plan yet or a draft plan, but the discussion at the Heritage Committee was that commemoration can happen. Yes, there's a visual commemoration at the wall, but naming is an important part of commemoration that was discussed, and then potentially reusing some materials or having some other references to the historic building in some of the semi-public spaces and some of the public spaces. So, yeah, we're still waiting for a bit more detail on that or a draft plan.
Okay. So it's a referral to the Heritage Commission?
Can I just ask one more question?
Yeah.
Sorry. So we're referring to heritage because it's a variance on the heritage alteration permit, but shouldn't we be referring back to APC? It's quite a significant change from 15 dwelling units to 22 and underground parking and all that.
Yeah, so the reason staff is not recommending referral to the APC is because the variance, it's to the front setback, but that's really a facade, a design element. And the APC has commented on parking variances in the past. So now they're not seeking a parking variance. They are within their floor area ratio in the zoning bylaw. They can add those additional units within their 2.0 floor area, floor space ratio. So there's no, that's not a decision point. It just, the whole thing necessitated a visited design. So that's why we're not recommending referring to the APC.
Okay. I'll move it. That council refer the development variance and heritage alteration permit amendment applications 2714 Dunsmuir Avenue for referral to the Heritage Committee for comment.
Second.
Yep. I support that. But I'm just wondering about how we get the information back about the geotechnical and the parkade.
So I will ask for that information for the Heritage Committee. So the Heritage Committee has that information too. What kind of scoping or feasibility they've done to date, and maybe they have all the information we need. And then when it comes back to council, we can present that information together with the final proposed HAP.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So did you second that, or?
Sure.
Okay. All in favor? Carried. Next is 7.6, but I have to remove myself from this discussion as I have a perceived conflict of interest. I have 2 family members that have cabins on the existing property. So Councillor Sproul is going to step in.
Just take a few of the papers. In fact, was all so, okay. The OCP and zoning amendment application for Comox Lake Land Corporation referral responses.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? So, does the planner give us?
Yeah, I'm going to give an overview of the report. So this report brings back the early referral comments that were sent out to the Comox Valley Regional District, the Comox First Nations, the Watershed Advisory Group, and Island Health to get an initial comment to help work on the zone, the potential zone for the Comox Lake Land Corporation property. So we asked for some early referrals, comments, and then also on that drinking water protection zone that we discussed at our previous meeting, which was last year. So these are coming back to you for information, and then at this point request for referral to the Advisory Planning Commission. I provided all the referral comments are provided in the appendix. As you will see, there was some concern by the referral agencies, different levels of concern, and the key ones I'll just summarize the key ones by agency. Generally, a new drinking water protection zone was supported by all the agencies and the First Nation, the Comox, who commented. In terms of the via Island Health, their key comment and concern was about occupancy, not to increase occupancy on this property that's adjacent to a drinking water lake that provides drinking water. And the other concern of Island Health was that the everyone on that property, all the different dwellings have either separate wells or one community water system. Currently, there's some shared water systems. And the key comment from the Comox First Nation was also looking into over the long term, how can potential impacts on drinking water quality the risks be minimized. So recently, everyone on the property has upgraded their septic systems or put in holding tanks, so that they're all fairly new now. And Allen Health has confirmed the filings with respect to those, and we've confirmed that it's all been filed. Allen Health was in a referral comment identified two that hadn't been filed, but it was just the numbering and naming of the cabins was different at one point. So they're all with Allen Health. So what the Comox identified is a concern of what happens in 25 years, 30 years, when systems may start to fail again or get old or get outdated. So we have discussed this with the Comox Lake Land Corporation. One of the things that they suggested they could do, and it requires a bit more exploration with Allen Health as well, is just commit to regular inspections of all the systems and reporting to Allen Health, which is not generally a requirement. People have septics, have to do maintenance, and and Allen Health can request that. So this would be a more proactive approach. The CVRD did, so that was a key concern of the Comox First Nation, was the long-term impact. How do we minimize the risk over the long term? And the CVRD, as a purveyor of the drinking water, was their recommendation was not to support the rezoning and have the cabins remain lawful non-conforming. And they quoted the regional growth strategy, which is not in support of new development within the watershed. So we looked at what this would mean, and so maintaining the current lawful non-conforming status, what that would mean is and this is on page 3 of the report, is that the owners could still do some updates to their cabins under the Local Government Act. If something is lawful non-conforming, you can update it, you can repair it, you can't replace it. And structural alterations require you to go to the board of variance, which we have, which is a different process to get a variance, to seek approval for the variance to do any structural repairs or even a certain amount of expansion of the cabins. So every cabin would have to apply to go through that process if they're seeking to update the cabins and before they apply for a building permit. So when the CVRD said in their report the village should seek to phase it out, so we cannot actively phase it out. So the assumption in the Local Government Act is if it's very restrictive of what you can and can't do, then uses tend to become abandoned or phase themselves out, so to speak. So it's really anyone's best guess if that would happen here or would not happen here. I think you have the request. We reviewed what is requested by the applicants, and that's in attachment. Where is that? Sorry, is that attachment 1? The rezoning request versus the existing regulations, and in our analysis, we're presenting the staff recommendation at this point to move forward with this application, but not necessarily. But have further discussion with the Comox Lake Land Corporation, and it's really at council's purview to decide what you agree with, what you might want to see changed in a new zone if you support a new zone for the Comox Lake Land Corporation. So in our review, the new drinking water protection zone that council supported through a resolution in principle in last year. The question is whether to include docks or not include docks, and there's about, I believe it is 16 docks currently within the Comox Lake Land Corporation property. They own the property line is into the lake, so the docks are actually I believe they're all within their property. But a zone could still not permit the docks, and then the same would happen with the docks as would be the case with cabins. They become lawful non-conforming, so they can be updated, fixed, repaired, but replacement would require Board of Variance decision. So from an environmental perspective, one of the recommendations of the environmental biophysical review study was that the docks should be replaced over time, as they're currently grounding out when the water level is low. So it's more desirable to have the docks elevated. So there's no scouring along the foreshore. So to facilitate that, that process of replacing the docks, the new drinking water protection zone, currently as it's proposed, would permit the 16 docks, but only those 16 docks. And then they could be replaced under new environmental best practices. In terms of the permitted uses, so staff and the support there is change in use that is proposed by the Comox Lake Land Corp, which would omit vacation rentals. They're currently permitted. Low impact recreation is permitted. Campgrounds and urban agriculture are all permitted. And considering it's on the drinking water supply, vacation rental guests often might not be aware of that. So it's preferable to have residents or people own the cabins and visit the cabins who know what kind of situation exists and that they're on a drinking water supply. So staff support that, and our recommendation is to support that, omitting those other additional uses. So then the other current permitted use is one single-family dwelling, and of course that is really the big item for this application, is to permit all 25 cabins on the property. And in principle, staff is supporting that change. And permit a density of 25 single-family dwellings, which would then facilitate all the cabin owners get the necessary building permits and update their cabins to make them somewhat more functional, but also at the same time help the village deal with some of the construction that has happened in the past without building permits, and try to rectify all that over time. Then I think the one that is really is a big question mark, I guess, in staff's mind, and has to be further discussed, and we'll be looking for the recommendation of the Advisory Plan Commission also, is gross floor area. And the cabin owners wish to increase the cabin size to them. What it says in their proposal was to increase it to the maximum size of the cabin as per cabin 7, which is about 2,300 square feet. I might have the square meters wrong there, the conversion, and which is as per cabin 7. However, in other discussions with them, I should say, we've also, and that's in the text, they've also proposed they could rebuild on the existing footprint, but build up to 2 stories. So and then have a maximum floor size. So the current building that is at that maximum size would not be able to expand. And we could itemize that per cabin, what that would look like. The summary table gives you a little bit of an idea how many cabins then could expand if it was limited to the existing footprint, but they would be permitted to have a second story. Other suggestions were to just allow everyone to increase their cabin by 25%. Except the one that's already at that maximum. So that would be, you can do that in the zone, it's just a little bit unusual. Usually there's one maximum size, so we'd have to list all the cabins and their maximum size. So, yeah, accessory buildings, perhaps there is currently a maximum for all accessory buildings on the property, which I think is hard to allocate among cabin owners. And so the proposal or the recommendation at this point is to determine a gross floor area for accessory buildings associated with each cabin, a maximum one, which could be allocated to a single one or 2 or 3 small ones, as the owners might wish, rather than one large maximum that then they have to allocate, and some people have already overbuilt more than their share, I guess you could say, of accessory buildings, would then, there may be a fairness issue. So the CLC is also requesting the ability to subdivide into 25 strata lots. So that would be the next step following the rezoning process. So the zone would then basically have a minimum lot size that would permit that to happen. We really had to look at this one hard. Yes, there's support for 25 cabins to permit a certain amount of increase in size to make them more functional. The subdivision is a whole nother ball game, and so in our staff's mind, that is adding development, and is not supported by the regional growth strategy policies of no new development, and also, it would give additional development rights to the property. So at this point, the staff recommendation is not to permit subdivision. So they would continue having a corporation own the property as it is now, and through their lease areas and their own bylaws regulate themselves in that manner. Water systems, so I've already talked about that. The key request from Island Health was either individual wells or a single shared community water system. So the CLC has generally agreed with that. I mean, they would prefer to be able to share some of the shared wells, but I think that's just not a VIA. VIA can't support that. For wastewater systems, so as I mentioned, they've recently all been updated, and based on the Comox First Nation comment, we're looking into a possible agreement that would require regular inspections to make sure over time those systems continue to be well maintained and don't fail. I mean, that's really the most critical impact potentially on the drinking water supply is the wastewater systems and their functioning. The other issue that was identified, and is not an issue with all the cabins. Some of them have oversteep cut slopes, and if they're very close to the shoreline and the slope fails, there could be some sediment load into the lake, so that is a concern. And that could be, so the recommendation is there be a requirement to deal with those oversteepened slopes and any sort of erosion hazards into the lake. And that could be addressed as a condition of the rezoning. And stormwater management, same. There was a few issues identified, largely just drainage from gutters not connecting to a proper drainage system. And again, it's erosion into the lake with sediment. Then we also discussed the protection of the upland forest with the owner. So this was again, similar vein, seeking to overall improve protection of the drinking water supply as part of this rezoning. That was staff goals. So, in our view, requiring the slope erosion issues to be dealt with, the stormwater management issues to be dealt with, the agreement for the septic inspections are all key to protect drinking water supply. And then the protection of the upland forest is in a similar vein. If that forest was logged by the Land Corporation a number of years ago to raise money, I believe, for some of the things that they were seeking to do. So that does potentially also result in more sediment load into the lake. So protecting of the forest area staff felt was quite important. So there's different mechanisms to do that. It could be tree protection bylaw or incorporate into or a conservation covenant mechanism. They've also asked for they've offered some park dedication, and this still has to be discussed with the Parks Department. It's very steep slopes on both sides of where the last cabin ends, and between the last cabin and the start of Comox Lake Park, Cumberland Lake Park. Is fairly steep, so we do have a desire to put a roadside trail in along Comox Lake Road, but we have to do some scoping whether it doesn't appear to be feasible at first look there. So whether that is more of a liability or an asset to the village, we still have to determine. So that as we go through this process, we'll check into that a little bit more. Yeah, so I think really that's I guess my key points, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. And
Yeah, sorry, I don't remember what order. Would you like to go first,
sure.
Councillor Kevler?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to say to Karen that thanks for putting together this report. There are a lot of variables to consider with this, and I don't imagine that it was easy to put it together. So thanks for that. When it comes down to it, though, I think it's really about it is a watershed area. It's right on the lake that Island Health, CVRD, KFN, conservation partners don't want to see development out there, increased development out there. And under what we have now, legally non-conforming, then they can repair things, but they won't be able to expand things. And I think that is what the intention is. So in that way, I agree with staff recommendation that we shouldn't allow subdivision, that it should continue under that zoning. But I don't think that status quo should continue, because there are a lot of things like you've listed, building permits that haven't been issued, the wells, retaining walls that are not to code, on the slopes that are, and the stormwater are both causing erosion issues. The upland forest, as you mentioned, could also be a water quality issue in the future. And the docks are also causing erosion. So there's a lot of things that I think need to be better regulated without permitting increased density there. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to get there at this point. I'm interested to hear what the Advisory Planning Commission says, but yeah, that's sort of the conundrum that we have with this long-standing issue. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you so much for this report, Karen. It's clearly complicated, and even just looking at the, I'd love to see when it comes back to us a closer map, so that we can really look at the detail, because as I'm looking at it, it's also butts up against the bottom of Perseverance Creek. So, that draws in not just lake concerns, but also fish and erosion and all the other things that go with the bottom of a river that's entering a lake. That's butt up against residential development. So, and the climate change that is upon us and changing our weather system. So we might want to look at those impacts as well while we're doing this. Definitely think it should have an EDPA on it. I didn't realize that the property went right into the lake, so that's quite concerning. But I don't suppose they can do anything with that except docks. So, okay, I agree that we don't want any expansion out there. And I'm interested to see what the APC says as well, because when I was reading the bit about do we go this way or that way with the maximum size, if we say the one giant cabin that's clearly been illegally added onto over and over again, I'm guessing, that we're favoring them by allowing them to continue and nobody else can expand, and they followed the rules and these people didn't. So I don't want to create that situation, and I don't know how we get around that. So yeah, just happy to refer it and look for more, I don't know,
Feedback.
suggestions.
Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, just one.
Oh, sorry, I didn't.
Oh, sorry, one clarification, if that's okay. So Perseverance Creek, the CVRD, when they bought the Coal Beach property, so the property just to the north of Perseverance Creek was part of the Comox Lake Land Corporation property, right? And they purchased the middle part.
Yeah.
The two were connected, that northern cabin area and the southern cabin area. They did also purchase Setback from Perseverance Creek. I don't have it in my head right now. I think it is 30 meters. It might be 15. So that's part of the CVRD property on the south side of Perseverance Creek.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just hard to see on the little.
Yeah. No, we
the
can
inset
provide
map.
a better site plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. Well, I don't have much more to add than the other councillors. The thought that if we just ignore everything and everyone will phase out their fancy cabins on the lake is just absolutely not a reality. So I'm happy to see that we're trudging through this. As has already been said, there's just so many variables, but I'm sure if that we keep trudging that we're going to find out the answers. And looking forward to see whatever solution we can come up with.
Sorry, I have one more.
Yes, go ahead.
That's
Nana.
okay. On the chart, at the very end, page 171, why are some squares pink? What does the pink mean?
So the pink are either below the floodplain elevation permitted in our floodplain bylaw, or they are within a 50-meter setback from the lake. So, or the flood construction level, the setback from this flood construction level. So, all those cabins would have to apply for exemptions under our floodplain enrichment bylaw. What's it called? Yeah.
Whatever it's called.
Yeah,
Okay.
whatever it's called. Yeah.
And then it looks like cabin number 11, as you follow it along, it says abandoned. Does that mean that the cabin's been abandoned or the water supply has been abandoned? And
Yeah, so that cabin wasn't actively used for quite some time. However, the owner has put in a new well and a new and hydro connection, so the intent is there to use it or convert it or update it. So the table says abandoned, that's a consultant's table.
okay.
So if under Local Government Act, it's quite difficult to prove that a use has ceased. So that's the other challenge that we're facing. So while then technically then we just have 24 cabins because that use has ceased, and then they lose their lawful non-conforming status. But it's quite tricky to do. Yeah, if you have the intent to develop it or update it, the use hasn't technically ceased, so it's quite tricky how you actually determine if a use has ceased. Yeah, but currently it's not occupied
Right.
and not occupiable.
Yes. Abandoned.
So, Councillor, you finished?
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
I have lots to say, but my voice is giving up. I know a lot of the history, of course, but that the banks of the creek that you're talking about being steep and stuff, that a lot of that is coal slag, each side of the mouth of the creek. Right now, there are big efforts from the Forest Society to try and buy that land at the mouth of the creek. The regional district owns the other side, and it's very delicate. The whole thing has had a lot of time, money put into it to save the creek. The cabins were not, somebody said to me, well, what's the zoning? They were just a handful of people just built cabins when the strike was on in about 1912. A lot of them came about because people didn't have a place to live. But there wasn't any zoning or planning. They just happened to be there. And it's a really strange property in that part of it is in the northeast corner, and they won't be connected to sewage or water. They'll have to have their own supplies of that. And I'm curious that people can have septic systems to their cabins so close to the lake. Again, I can understand the concerns of the First Nations and the regional district because it is drinking water supply, and those are the only cabins that are actually on the lake, lived in, some of them full time. So one has to really think twice about that if you're going to allow any domestic settlement on land that is so sensitive, and water that is so sensitive. And the reason the water goes, they own the subsurface rights, is because the water came in when the dam went in. So that's how come they own the bottom of the water. But I can't support this. I don't think there's any advantage to the people of the Comox Valley who drink the water downstream, or to the people of Cumberland. I would only see that there'd be bigger houses if there wasn't going to be any kind of zoning. I don't know how you decide who gets what land and what cabin and what, you know. They were never meant to be full-time, year-round cabins. So they're recreational cabins, and that's what I vote for. So, do we have, the recommendation is to refer to...
Yeah, I'll move that we refer the report, referral, committee comments, and Comox Lake Land Corporation rezoning application to the Advisory Planning Commission for comment.
Second.
All in favor? So, where's the mayor?
Okay.
We're,
So we're on 7.7.
7.7, that council receive the urgent replacement of Cumberland Fire Rescue Unit 5 report.
Oversee.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Evening,
Welcome,
Mayor
Chief.
and Council. Hopefully you've read this already, but I'll go over it if you like. It's our Unit 5 we're planning on replacing in 2024. And we knew about the problems with it, but we felt we could make it last. And the other day we were on a call, and carries 2,000-pound skid unit, a wildfire skid unit in the back, foam and 160 gallons of water, and it's quite heavy. It's 2,000 pounds plus axes and other firefighting equipment. We were off-road with it, and the back box structure collapsed on one side, and so we had trouble even getting it out of the bush. But we got it out of there and got it fixed up a bit so we could drive it around, but it's not going to be able to handle what we want to use it for. So we're requesting to buy a newer one, not a brand new one, but a used one, to give us that capability to tow our structural protection trailer, tow our boat, tow our environmental trailer, do work up in the back country here, or support places we can't get an engine. We could take that unit and you know, do some quick fire suppression with it, if necessary, if needed. Mind you, the people are doing a very good job in the back country. Haven't had too many problems, but just in case we do, we need a unit to be able to get back there. A lot of those places back behind the landfill, that's where this incident happened. You can't, we can't get an engine back there, so we have mutual aid resources we could use, but they're maybe slow activating or whatever. But anyways, we're looking at replacing it, and like I say, with a used vehicle, it's a little bit hard to find a 3,500 vehicle, like a one-ton vehicle. We have found two. We've been looking this week and trying to find them if you do pass this. And we did find two, one in Campbell River, which is 5 years old, and one in Duncan, which is a 22 years old. And we'll be able to meet that, meet their costs with this amount of money. And one probably won't use the full amount of money, and the one in Campbell River is a little cheaper. They're about $10,000 difference in the price of vehicles, but then it may not last as long. We haven't checked them out yet thoroughly, like gone and seen them. We just looked online with it. So, is there any questions on that?
Councillor Brown?
Definitely agree we need a bush truck. So, and we have the money in reserve. And I understand we were going to buy a new one in a couple of years anyway. So that's all good. I'm concerned that another four-door pickup, even as a one-ton, is not solid enough to carry the the weight and the, don't we need a dually or something? That's,
No, actually, a dually's more problems. Courtney has the same vehicle. Comox has the same vehicle with skid units. We were the first ones to have a skid unit about 8 years ago, but now they've used our unit also, and they've actually purchased the exact same thing we're looking to purchase.
okay, so it was the age of the vehicle, not the weight that.
Yeah, not the weight.
Okay. Okay.
Anyone else? Yes, Councillor?
You're always asking us for vehicles or boats or, just kidding. So this,
That ain't gonna stop, by the way.
the reserve,
Everything's brand new now.
Yeah.
There's almost nothing else.
the reserve is also for equipment though, right? For fire equipment. So are you expecting that you will be
That reserve, I believe, is for vehicles, right, Michelle?
And protected fire.
and protected?
okay.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, just to help you out with that, it is separate, and I do save portions of it, and we dip into that portion, like the protective equipment part of the fund at times, and then we pay it back a little bit. So, you're going to have some real challenges coming up with some vehicle purchases, but that's something that you'll have to deal with on that side while you keep some money in there. This isn't one of them for that.
So the fire engine that we were going to purchase from Courtney, we didn't actually end up purchasing that, right? So did that leave some of that money in the kitty for us, or?
We didn't end up purchasing it, that's correct.
Yeah. But we had money in reserve for that purchase?
We did.
Okay. But obviously what's in reserve now wouldn't have covered that purchase, so we've been spending it on other.
It would have covered that purchase, yes.
Okay.
You want me to speak to that?
Yeah.
So you have after this purchase, you have $135,000.
Okay.
Only because we were also going to sell the
Engine three.
engine 3. So that's actually like that.
We're going to pay one with the other.
We were going
Yeah,
to sell
okay,
that and
yeah.
buy the other one. So I
Okay.
took that one out of the reserve as well because we actually are still going to sell it, just not, we don't think we'll get as much. And so that's kind of impacted the reserve as well from that purchase. So
Okay.
it's-
But it sounds like we're going to run out of reserve for a future vehicle purchase pretty quickly.
That's correct. So but however, you do have your emergency and public safety reserve that you're saving for police. So when you get to that stage, that's part of a strategy as well that you guys might be able to look at, because you can spend it on, like you can transfer it into this if it's too much by the time you get to that level of funding that you need.
Okay.
So but yes, you are. This
And we're
reserve
not
is-
dipping into the equipment reserve so much that it puts us at risk for that.
No, unless we, like, my understanding is that we're probably going to be able to sell the engine 3 for about 50.
Oh, we're hoping, fire engines, they go a dime a dozen really. And I have really no idea what we'd get for that. I'm actually hoping between 30 and 50,000, but even that, I'd be lying if I told you we're gonna get 50 or 30,000. I don't know what we're gonna get. We put it on bid and we don't need it anymore. So we might as well liquidate it and get what we can for it and help with other purchases.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that a used 1 ton is 80,000 when we can't get 30,000 for our fire engine. Yeah.
Exactly.
And sorry, I'll just quickly add though as well, is the breathing apparatus that was purchased not long ago
Yeah.
doesn't have to be replaced probably until like mid 2028 or something, 2028. So that's why.
Oh, it's longer than that. It's like
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
35 or something. It's
Yeah.
guaranteed actually for 15 years, and our last breathing apparatus lasts us 20 years. So I would say at least 15 years from now.
So that's why we can dip into
Okay.
what we need and then pay it back, because we have a bit of a longer period for that equipment.
But you're always going to require new vehicles. That is, I can't see that stopping. Like, you're always gonna have to reserve money for new vehicles.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the town's growing and things are growing and things are changing, and, I wouldn't be thinking you don't need to be adding to reserve vehicles. That's why we're in this kind of little mess. We haven't been doing that large enough amounts, because the prices increases are just, they just climb like crazy.
Well, we only started reserves in general for the village last term, so I think we're doing pretty good in that regard.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're saying like new fire engine now, like say a ladder truck or whatever, you're looking at $1.5 million. And a new engine, $800,000. So there's a lot of money to be thinking about.
Anything else?
Well, if they're a dime a dozen, we should just lowball Campbell River and get it going.
I'll work on that.
Someone like to make the motion, please?
Sure, I'll move that council approve the expenditure of up to $80,000 to be funded through Fire Vehicle and Protective Equipment Reserve for the unexpected replacement of Cumberland Fire Rescue Unit Number 5, and that council just direct staff to bring forward an amendment to the adopted 2020-2026 financial plan bylaw to reflect this expenditure, and that council approve sole supplier procurement for the purchase of a second-hand fire vehicle, Cumberland Fire Rescue Unit Number 5 replacement vehicle, due to uncertainties with with the current supply issues in the second-hand vehicle market.
Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, that council receive the Cumberland Trail Network Memorandum of Understanding Report.
Receipt. Second.
All in favor? Carried.
All right. Well, this report in many ways is complementary to the presentation received by council earlier this afternoon at the Committee of the Whole from the United Riders of Cumberland presenting their trail network strategic plan. But essentially what this is about is that relationship, or the formal relationship, and how we work with both UROC and the private timber companies. So currently that's through a license agreement that was drafted by the timber companies about 7 years ago. And its intent was really to enable that public access to private lands. The village was included in it at that time based on lack of a long range plan for the village forest lands, the 230 hectares that surround the drinking water reservoirs. And that model has worked quite well over time, but as we evaluated each year, we recognized there was probably a better way of organizing those formal relationships. And based on advice we received and conversations, the model presented here tonight is what we're calling a memorandum of understanding that would serve as an umbrella agreement and still formalize that relationship between the three major landowners, the village being one, and UROC as the trail manager for those private lands, which would allow the agreements to have some different content and topics in it that were missing from the license agreement. So that speaks to a much more holistic look on the landscape, including values that weren't addressed previously. And so it still creates a formal tie between the parties and still allows there to be a framework for working together, but it also paves the way for other things to happen, specifically around trail planning, which has become quite important given growth in the usage of the network in the community, and to the need for coordination between trail plans across property boundaries. And within that, there's a lot of other benefits as well. So, yeah, essentially that's the model that's being proposed. UROC would still hold license agreements, and they're actively working with these, with the two timber companies right now, to ensure that public access to private land piece is still dealt with from that legal perspective. And the village would still obviously be party to the broader management of the network, and specifically the trails in our parks and on the village forest lands. So any questions, let me know.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you. Congratulations. Took a really long time, and now here it is. So that's great. There's nothing in the MOU about races or events. So they're not listed under the framework, but they're under permits and licenses, and it mentions third-party events policy. I'm just, I guess, trying to get a handle on when we max out events and where language around events needs to lie and whether it needs to be built into this agreement as well, or that's a side agreement with UROC and other people who host events in there.
Yeah, so the way events are managed by the village is we have a permit policy for both where the event is hosted, so most often Village Park, as well as for the use of any village trails. So virtually all the events end up with a permit for both Village Park and the community forest. And so and then the timber companies have their own permitting process, and UROC has also been increasingly been engaging with event holders so that they can get compensated for the use of the infrastructure that they're managing by the event. So how events are managed by the village and our working relationship with any of those event managers would probably be best done through a policy that speaks to events and not specifically how trails are managed, would be my recommendation.
And do we have something like, I mean, I'm sure we have an events policy, but specific to trail use? Is there like a separate one for trail use, or is it just a parks permit?
They're spoken to in some of our management plans. So the old community forest management plan does have some content around special event provision. I think that there's multiple issues with event management in the village right now, and it's not only the impact on trails, but also the impact in where the event's being hosted and the frequency of them. And so that's where I'm not sure whether it's best done through, a trail, like an MOU like this, or whether it's more at a village-wide perspective around event management. Because I think a village park management plan or a community forest management plan is just going to be one piece of that puzzle.
Yeah.
So this speaks to the process in which events are allowed, and it speaks to the need for those third-party applications, but it doesn't speak to a policy around if or when an event is approved. That's subject to each individual permitter.
So we have freedom to set those policies outside of
We're
this
not tied
agreement.
to, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Just on that topic, earlier today in the committee of the whole, it sounded like the sustainability policy that they were working on right now that we haven't actually seen with UROC, that they were going to be addressing those kind of issues around event use.
Yeah, UROC's done quite a bit of work I guess I would respond with two comments. One is UROC has multiple of their own internal events, and they're important fundraisers for the organization, and they have they've tweaked a few of them over the years, but they're largely like the traditional events that have occurred in the community for a decade or more. Then there's these third-party events, and UROC has been developing a policy, and I'm not sure whether that's addressed in their sustainability policy, but on how they work with these other user groups who are accessing their trails. It comes at a cost to UROC, and there's the administration of that and whatnot. So I know they have a policy about being fairly compensated for that, but the sustainability of that, I'm not sure that might be addressed. That was the first time I'd heard of that, and I think it's under development, and it sounds like they'd be interested in bringing it back to council.
Yeah, it sounded like they would bring it back, and that would be great to be able to put our concerns forward in light of that information that they'll be bringing back to us. I said basically what I wanted to say earlier today, that I'm glad that we've sort of started to align some of those ecological values by the incorporation of our village forest lands management direction statement and the interim trail management strategy into the MOU. And we talked about incorporating some more First Nations values like language on signs. So I hope to see that come back as well. Thanks.
Do you have questions?
I just have to add just what I kind of mentioned earlier today at the committee of the whole, also just how impressed I am with UROC in the last couple of years and how much the alignment has come at a lot of the behest of the council too. But they're listening to us and you and staff, and it's really nice to see. Thanks.
Councillor Sproul?
What can I say? They've created a world-class facility, and we don't have to drive anywhere to it. So for locals and for visitors, it's a real win.
Yes, it is certain, and UROC has done an excellent job on looking at the quality of the trails. And I think that was never addressed earlier on. And I think I looked at through the Whistler standards, and they're very, very high standards and require a lot of attention. So I'm really glad that they have adopted that standard. And it's just showing everybody how they feel about the trail and the community to do that. I think it's very, very important.
Yeah, this afternoon, I think I heard positive experience more in one delegation than ever, which is a good
Maybe 10
good sign. Yeah,
times, maybe 10 times.
yeah, there's a lot of positive experiences going
experiences.
around in the forest, and it's good to hear about.
Yes. So what is your pleasure, Council?
I just have one more question, sorry, that I missed. On page 177, it talks about the shift from the village forest lands, which I believe would be the watershed lands. That used to be UROC responsibility for management of the trails and liability for said trails, and now that will be ours. And I just wanted to confirm that we are not planning on building any new trails in the watershed lands. And that's why maybe we're managing them, and also because they're ours, not theirs. Yeah.
Yeah, what's proposed in this really formalizes a practice that we've had in place for a few years now. When we initiated the research and started to understand some of the sensitivities of those lands, and there's actually within that management direction statement, there is some content on how to manage trails in an environmentally sensitive area, and it speaks largely to not constructing new trails as well. So under the under the existing, although somewhat not in practice, arrangement where there's a license agreement for those lands and UROC is liable and responsible for managing those, we had a very hands-on approach into what was allowed, and this formalizes that practice essentially. Yeah.
Thank you.
And the liability piece is largely dealt with. Like there's an inspection program in place. The trails are being well maintained. They're all signed. The risk ratings are all identified and whatnot. So it's similar to a village park in terms of access.
Thank you.
So what is your pleasure, Council? The recommendations there.
I'll move that council enter into the memorandum of understanding for access, collaborative management, and use of the Cumberland Trail Network as attached to this report, dated July 28th, 2022, and authorize the mayor and chief administrative officer to execute the agreement.
Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Well done, Kevin. I know you played a huge role in this, so thank you. Next, that council receive the anti-racial discrimination and anti-racism policy report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
So you'll recall that last month council referred a proposed policy, anti-racial discrimination, anti-racism policy, to the Accessibility and Inclusion Committee. And in the report there, you'll see the committee's recommendation was to adopt the policy as presented with reference to the BC Human Rights Code, which was as written. And the committee also recommended that council request that the law firm that drafted the policy to broaden the scope of what is considered discrimination for general equity and inclusion, and to include all forms of discrimination within the policy. So we've had some initial discussion with the Stone and Company law firm, and they're willing to consider that. At this point, we're recommending that council refer the policy back to staff, as the policy has quite a broad application to the village, includes employees, elected officials, general operations, contractors, and volunteers. So I think it would be great to have some time for staff to look how it jives with other policies, including the employee bullying and harassment policy, as well as purchasing and other policies and activities of the village, and come back to council on that.
Okay. Any questions from council?
I'll move the council receive the I'll move the council refer the proposed anti-racial discrimination and anti-racism policy to staff review and recommendation.
Can I have a seconder, and then we can answer your question?
Second. Sorry.
Okay, Councillor.
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna mention that, the same, document went to the regional district where the staff are also reviewing it there.
The implications, yes, Councillor Sumner?
Didn't-
Oh,
Voting.
all in favor? Carried. Next, council reports. Actually has quietened down quite a bit, which is really nice. And I attended a meeting with the Beaufort Family Health Society, that's the medical clinic, and with our MLA Josie Osborne. It was an introduction of all the board members to our MLA, and it was a very nice meeting, very supportive of the concept. To attend the British Columbia Social Procurement Initiative quarterly meeting, and it's an update on all the comings and goings in the collective, and we have gained quite a few new members to the committee because we're going province-wide now, and there's a lot of interest from a lot of outgroups, universities, hospitals, and it's really growing quite substantially, the membership. Had a meeting with Dawn to Dawn and the Transition Society, and again with MLA Josie Osborne could not attend, but her assistant did, and it was to discuss the project in Cumberland, the family housing at Kawatsedas building, and it was just to bring everybody up to speed on to what is happening. And I did attend the meeting or the open house at the Flats of Cumberland. And I asked him why they chose that name, and it is flat, he said. Which is really unusual in Cumberland, because they didn't have to blast. And that's the iconic building development that's going on. And they showed some of the designs of the places that were going in. And it was a pre-sale. They actually had people inside signing up. And they were very pleased at the turnout for the day. Minister Bill Blair, the British Columbia Mayor, is on disaster response and climate resiliency. The federal government gave $870 million for BC, the first payment for disaster relief. And what they really talked about a lot about was during these disasters, it seems like some of the areas, it's a repeat all the time of the same thing happening. So they want to get into it to where those issues are and solve the issues for once, and not having to come back and repeat fixing those issues. So that was really interesting to hear. And they also want an early warning system set up for the province, so that people are aware when there's severe happenings in the province. So that was interesting from them. And then I attended the Cumberland Business Association board meeting and heard that the Thrive grant is proceeding. And also, the next day I got to tour a doctor through the medical clinic that the doctor was coming from Ontario, and they were looking for a facility to be a doctor in. And they were looking at 3 different locations. And unfortunately, because we have not heard yet about the funding for our medical clinic, they are probably going to go to one of the other clinics. But stay tuned. And then we had a local government emergency heat call from Minister Farnsworth. And they talked about the different things that are going on as far as the ministry's concerned about heat. And they're very concerned about the vulnerable population, and they have established health plans and plans for rental facilities for municipalities. Cooling devices rentals would be paid by the province. So they're putting some money towards some of these issues for the heat. And attended the Immigrant Welcome Center and Comox Valley Chamber of Commerce joint meeting, and they had a presentation from a panel, and it was very, very interesting and I was really glad to be there. They had a discussion on developing an inclusive culture in the workplace, and the 3 guest panelists did an excellent job. It was very well received. And my last was a meeting with the Cumberland Seniors Housing Society and BC Housing on future plans, and there was some open discussion about the future of the Centennial Place and Union Square. That was my month. Councillor Spruill, did you want to give a report?
I haven't really
Okay,
got
that's fine.
anything.
And Councillor Kettler, did you want to add anything?
I'm just looking for mine because I didn't have my computer, so I wrote it on a phone and emailed it to myself, but now I actually can't find it, so maybe go to somebody else and then come back to me.
Okay, Councillor Sullivan?
I was gone for a good portion of June and July. My hospital board was canceled in June, so I didn't really have any official business in June. I did run a street hockey tournament at the beginning of June, so I'd like to thank Kent and Simon from the fire department. They showed up and did some volunteer first aid for us. It was a really successful event, other than the sideways rain while we were setting up and during the weekend. But now we're going to be running next year during the celebration, so that'll be pretty exciting. So I want to really thank those guys for their participation and all the volunteers who helped us out. Yeah, and other than that, I've been going to the Thursday night Elevate events, which have been excellent, and just trying to just get out in the community and participate as much as I can. It's been a really good summer. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, those Thursday concerts are so lovely. What can I talk about? Okay, so the local government policing modernization roundtable, we've, I believe, had our final meeting for now and reviewed, so the Special Committee on Reforming the Police Act had set out a set of recommendations, and UBCM set up this roundtable to go through those recommendations and make sure they made sense to us. So that's basically what we did. We all provided input on the recommendations, and there is a session at UBCM on this topic as well. And then, yeah, so once that information is submitted, there'll be a secondary process, and hopefully UBCM will continue to be involved. I'm not sure whether the roundtable will be, but it was a fulsome process, and I was happy to be involved. And yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. I see there that you went to Scale Collaborative. Did you get the information that you needed?
Yeah, so I participated in a survey of local government electeds on investing, on local impact investing with the large funds that we carry. So rather than investing through MNA, whatever it's called, or just investing there, or investing through a bank or a credit union, looking at how to perhaps pool that money, or individual local governments set up different kind of investing mechanisms that can create local impact. So this is a very new, it was a BCIT student project for their, can't remember if it was a master's or what, but that final report has just come out, and I think I emailed it to everybody, and along with the different types of community investing that are out there. Now the organization Scale or Thrive Collaborative, those two organizations are connected, will be going through that report and figuring out how they can continue to work with local governments to find different ways of doing that kind of investing. I think it fits really well. It's sort of, to me, it's a bit like our social procurement. It's like, it's something we're doing anyway. We may as well make it work better for our community. But it's very beginning stages.
Good. Councillor Kettler.
Yeah, I lost the report, but but I do have my calendar in front of me. So there were a few minister meetings that that Mayor Barrett also attended, so on the 5th, I was participating in a Fire Safety Act working group. That's through UBCM, working with the Office of the Fire Commissioner around having one fire safety standard for unincorporated areas, so for the regional district. So that's an ongoing conversation that they want regional districts to take over inspection of public buildings in unincorporated areas, which they currently don't. And that's for many reasons. One of those is because many of them don't have fire protection, like we just got fire protection up Mount Washington. And the other reason is the regional district doesn't issue business licenses, so there is an inspection through business license. So it's a murky area that the province would like local government to take over, but there's obviously a cost, and it is very much a downloading situation. So we're working with UBCM to try and see how we could do it in an equitable way. And then I got invited to Cumberland Rotary to do a little presentation on CBRD. So that was fun. Thanks for that invitation. Of course, we had the public hearing with the village, and I also got to go to Fall River, which was very nice. Had our homelessness and affordable housing committee on the 20th. Where we dealt with a lot of the issues that were on the agenda for tonight, vacation policy and streamlining development permits for ADUs. And my regular monthly meetings with the CBRD and with Comox First Nation. And yeah, and the regular board meetings with the regional district went through the month of July.
Any questions?
So now do you get a holiday?
Yeah, no, it's not a big break yet. Still regional district meetings tomorrow, and then on the 30th. So.
There's a recommendation to receive.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next, that council bylaws. That council receive the July 22nd, 2022 report, Vacation Rental Regulations Amendment Bylaws Report.
Receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Good evening, Mayor and Council again. So this report presents the bylaw, the zoning amendment bylaw 1170 for third reading and adoption, and also the bylaw 1171, the business license amendment bylaw for third reading. The business license amendment bylaws cannot be adopted at the same meeting, so that's why it's for third reading here. We held the public hearing on July the 6th. About 13 people attended, and we had 3 verbal submissions at the meeting, presentations by people in attendance. 2 of the presenters raised some concerns and asked some questions. Concerns raised were regarding the proposed requirement for an outdoor sign. The concern was that it might compromise the security of the residents or the guests or their property. On-site parking requirements may require tree removal, and whether it was not clear whether children would be counted, maximum number of guests. One comment was that enforcement might be challenging, and there was a concern about restricting the option for residents to temporarily rent out their home while on vacation, and occasional rentals should be permitted and could be regulated through business licensing. Given the previous discussions on these items, staff at this time is not recommending any changes to the bylaws. The outdoor sign was discussed as part of the, it was one of the questions in the survey that went out, and 62% of the survey respondents supported an outdoor sign. At the discussion with the committees, it was mixed. Two of the committees, one of the committees, it carried unanimously. They were opposed. APC was divided, but it carried, and the Housing Committee was for. So the rationale for having an outdoor sign is that if it's run as a business, then sharing a business number should not be an issue. It does allow neighbors to have a contact, to contact somebody in case of an emergency. The village office would have the contact information, but we're not always here, and we're not here on weekends when some of the places may be rented out. So it was for having contacts for the neighbors. On-site parking requirements could be dealt with through a variance if that is an issue. Then whether it's clear whether children are counted as part of the or maximum number of guests. At one point we have to draw a line, so it gets really tricky. It's probably not something we would enforce. If there are 6 people and someone has a child, we cannot capture everything, but if it doesn't result in a complaint, it's not a big concern. Enforcement may be challenging, yes, and we hope to gain experience in that in the next little while. And there's a recommendation to allow us to pursue some enforcement more proactively in the short term. And the regulation restricting the option for residents to temporarily rent out their home while on vacation, and that occasional rent should be permitted and could be regulated through business licensing. So absolutely, occasional rentals do not take away from the housing stock. If someone truly lives in Cumberland, but as their primary residence, goes away for 3 weeks, wants to rent out their place, in principle, that is supportable. The challenge is when we got a legal review of the regulations, is that permanent residency can be defined in many different ways, and one can actually have more than one permanent residence. So then the definition of permanent or of residency was updated as a result of legal advice to include present on the property. So whether someone's present 24/7 or not, but they're generally there, is to define permanent residency better. And that does make it the occasional rental. It does limit what you can do in terms of having an occasional rental when you're away on vacation. You could be house sitting, or you could have some other options potentially, but that was as a result of the legal advice. The language in the bylaw includes present now. And then the other one was in the previous council report, we did recommend to review the enforcement of the vacation rental regulations, part of your review of the bylaw enforcement policy. So that's not as imminent as this adoption of this bylaw. So staff is recommending council direction to permit some proactive enforcement. We do have complaints coming in, or just even tips, and so, in some cases it really is desirable to send out a warning letter right away. So our request is to receive direction of council to be able to do some proactive enforcement, and then as part of your budget process, you would review whether any additional resources could be dedicated to this.
Okay, questions? Councillor Sullivan?
I share the concerns about the outdoor sign. I appreciate what staff is saying about being able to contact the business owners. Is there any ideas of the minimum or maximum size of this sign? Or any requirements as of such for these signs?
Yeah, I mean, the bylaw includes a size in part of, so there would be a specific section on vacation rental signs in the zoning bylaw that has, the maximum size. It's basically what we did. It's similar to home occupation. And that's currently in the bylaw. Is that in the bylaw?
I have that in front of me.
To not
if I can help.
exceed 0.3 square meters. That's what it
Gross.
says.
Yeah, so that's reflects what we have for the home occupation. Yeah, you have to have something, right? So we just aligned it with signage for the home
I feel
occupation
like
use.
3 meters is excessive.
0.3.
0.3.
0.3 meters, yeah. Yeah, 3 meters is way too big. Yeah.
So-
My hearing is fading.
And no flashing
Yeah,
lights,
okay.
no neon.
Then that seems reasonable.
Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, just on the signs and the feedback from the public hearing about them feeling that it may compromise the security of the residents. I think because we've required through this bylaw as well that there has to be somebody living on site, so it's not a completely vacant property. So that's one side, and I think, if there is a concern, a security concern, if you have a business and you have many strangers going through your place, you might want video security anyway. So I don't really see that as like raising any alarm bells for security myself. Thanks.
Yeah, I feel like if we just have signs everywhere, it makes it less neighborhoody. But that's just my feeling. Depending on the size, obviously.
Yes. Okay. So what is your pleasure? No other questions?
No.
There's 3 recommendations there.
So that council amend bylaw 1170-2022 by striking "for whom" from the definition for residential use under section 2, B, following means occupancy and use by a person or persons. That council give third reading and adopt the thus amended bylaw 1170-2022, cited as zoning amendment bylaw number 1170-2022. And that council give third reading to bylaw 1171, cited as business license amendment bylaw number 1171-2022. And that council direct staff to enforce the vacation regulations in the zoning bylaw on a proactive basis.
Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. That is a big item off our plate. That was a lot of work. Thank you very much, Karen. Next, that council receive the streamlining accessory dwelling unit approval process report.
Move receipt.
Second.
Okay. So this report presents feedback from the committee referral and recommends draft bylaws for first and second reading for the streamlining the accessory dwelling unit approval process. So streamlining the ADU approval process is one of the recommendations of the development approval process modernization project. And the village's approval process for ADUs is more onerous than the recommended best practices by BC Housing and other municipal jurisdictions. This was pointed out in the initial recommendations report for this project. Staff spent a considerable amount of time on ADU inquiries and applications. And at the same time, there's a very high approval rate associated with these ADU development permit applications. Staff resources are limited, so the intent of streamlining is to improve the process for the applicant and to streamline to improve a level of service on more significant development applications, policy development, and other priority projects by freeing up staff time. Further to Council's direction on July 11th, staff referred the report to the APC, Homelessness and Affordable Housing Committee, and the Accessibility and Inclusion Committee. These 3 committees all supported the concept of streamlining the ADU process and requested an opportunity to review the draft bylaws and to comment on this companion guide that would be developed. The bylaws were drafted to address comments received from both council and committees where possible and within the legislative parameters of zoning bylaw and the Local Government Act regulations. So I'll point out some additional provisions incorporated into the draft bylaws those are additional to what was presented in an attached table on July 11th. In the R1A zone, the residential infill zone, there's an added requirement that would limit transparent surfaces on external second-story walls to 20% of the total wall area when the setback from the interior and rear lot lines is less than 2 meters. So this is really to address the windows overlooking neighboring properties situation. This is something that has been done in other jurisdictions. As well, outdoor lighting for the pathway connecting the ADU to the lane or the street would need to meet dark sky guidelines and be located in a range so that no direct rays of light are directed at any adjoining property. So we figured, okay, yes, we can figure out a way to require this in the zoning bylaw. And then the previous report talked about a 1.5 meter hard surface path to the frontage basically, which was to address both the requirement for a pedestrian path as well as a requirement for emergency access past the main dwelling to the street. We sort of combined two requirements that there are now, and upon further thought, discovered some reasons why we shouldn't combine these two requirements. So the 1.5 meter clear area, which is currently required in the zoning bylaw now, past the main dwelling to the front of the street, would be unchanged. And also the 1.2 meter hard surface pathway would also be unchanged. So that can go to either the lane or the street, whichever is most logical for that dwelling, likely wherever the parking is. So basically we are just sort of backpedaling something we thought was an improvement, and upon further thought we're just going to leave it the same. It also somewhat addresses some comments that a lot of interpret as well. It was pointed out that if the ADU is way at the back of the property and now you're requiring a hard surface path way to the front, that might be counter to some other goals about impervious surfaces and keeping costs low. So this also addresses that. The APC made a couple of other suggestions actually you don't find addressed in the bylaws, and I'll just briefly explain that. APC suggested that a certain size be allowed. On all lots of a certain size, the maximum ADU size be the maximum ADU size be allowed to, instead of the percentage gross floor area of the main dwelling. Staff agrees with that recommendation, but suggests that now is perhaps not the right time, because that could be a further discussion. Suggests that a change like that could be left for a future date, a zoning bylaw amendment in the future. And another suggestion is that tiny homes could be used as ADUs. If connected to village services. So right now you could use a prefab home, it could be small, as on a foundation with a building permit, but in terms of allowing a home which is on wheels and temporary, also don't recommend that, looking at that now, but it could be looked at potentially in the future, because further discussion could be required. So okay. So wrap it up. Should council give the subject bylaws readings today, the next steps would be the application guide and guidelines about form and character would be drafted and placed on the village website, along with background information in the amending bylaws for public review. We would issue a press release to notify the community that this information is available and there's an opportunity to comment and that these bylaw changes are proposed. And committee referrals would occur, and then a public hearing is anticipated to be held in mid-September.
Questions? Yes, Councillor Kettler.
Yeah, I am happy to see the inclusion of a lot of the concerns that I had and that the committees had included. You were able to include them in the zoning bylaw, so kudos to you. That's pretty good, because I thought that it would kind of just be left open to the brochure or the guide that we are going to develop without any sort of teeth. So I'm very happy that most of the suggestions that were put forward and the concerns have been included in the zoning bylaw, which is regulated. So that's wonderful. And the only really thing that's left up to the guide is really about form and character. So that's I think that's a really good thing, and good job. Thank you.
Anyone? Yes, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, so I really am in favor of giving you more time for other things. And I still am struggling with essentially streamlining applications for what are potentially commercial operations. So if someone's building a vacation rental as an ADU, we are fast tracking that. And our strategic priority is to fast track affordable housing, not vacation rentals. So I remain concerned about that. I know that I raised it with the consultant, and you guys were going to try and look at how that might be managed. So that's my first question. Can we manage that in some way? And then I have a couple of things. I appreciate the revision of the path thing. I think that's wise. But I'd like to make sure that it says permeable surface. So where it says hard surfaced, it could also say permeable is okay. I think, sorry, it's item 6 on page 283. Yeah. And I went away thinking, why would we require DPs for some and not all? And realized that we were doing that in the downtown core because we wanted to retain form and character control in the historic core of the village. So I think we've managed to do that. You've managed to do that with the, including all the things in the bylaw. But I think that guide, because most of the people who are building ADUs are not developers, they're single family dwelling owners. And most of us don't understand all the things. So I think that guide's going to be really important. So I agree that referring it around and having a really hard look at how we present that and how we encourage that is a good thing. So yeah, just my question on the commercial.
Sure. Yeah, in answer to that question, I don't consider it to be a fast tracking because in our experience with having received quite a number of DP applications for ADUs now, and something that actually council doesn't see because it's behind the scenes. So when we first get an inquiry, a first concept plan we receive, which sometimes comes with our application or sometimes it's before the application, like the first design. From that first design to what council sees, almost never changes. And if it does, it's very minor. It's like, oh, that shrub should be a little bit different. So it actually screens. So it's really also that makes me think this streamlining is really practical and we're losing very little. I mean, maybe every applicant closely inspects, all those design guidelines, and they would have designed something different if it wasn't for them. I think for the most part, people are building what they want to build, and it just generally actually looks nice, and so would fit our guidelines anyway. And then the key privacy elements are addressed in the zoning bylaw. So I think because we have all this experience and we're not seeing staff actually be involved in redesigning how these look at all, almost, I really think that it's practical rather than a fast track.
Okay. And then the only other thing I wanted to suggest is in the, so we're asking for screening on the garbage, and perhaps we should ask for bear-proof screening on the garbage.
We looked at that, yes, and that is actually covered in another bylaw.
Oh, perfect.
I forgot what it's called, something about garbage, solid waste. So it was a repeat before when we mentioned bear proof in the DP, so we don't need it duplicated in the zoning bylaw.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Make the motion.
Yeah, go ahead.
Move the council give first and second reading to the official community plan amendment bylaw number 1174/2022. That council give first and second reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 1175/2022, and that council refer the streamlining accessory dwelling unit approval process report, draft amending bylaws, and draft application guide to the APC, the Accessibility and Inclusion Committee, and the Homeless and Affordable Housing Committee, and that council direct staff to schedule a public hearing.
Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next, that council receive the development cost charge bylaw number 1173, 2022 report.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Well, last but not least, hey? Good evening, Mayor and Council. So, following a lot of work over the last year and a half on the development cost charge bylaw, and this is loud, sorry, it's kind of
Sounds good.
freaking me out a bit. I have to step away. No, it's all good. Put it back there. There we go. That's better. We are ready to present the a bylaw for our first 3 readings. Of course, Council had an opportunity to review the background report from the consultant, Urban Systems, and there were subsequent changes made to the background report, which was then submitted to the Ministry of Finance, the people responsible for reviewing DCC bylaws, and that was done before the first 3 readings so that we could have them fast track it once we get past the 3rd reading, so that we'd have quick turnaround on approval and then get 4th reading. So the bylaw, it's a new bylaw. It's different than the last bylaw. It talks about development cost charges, exemptions, calculations of applicable charges, and timing of payment and stuff like that. It's fairly straightforward bylaw, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Councillor Kettler?
Thanks, Rob. So I was wondering how we incorporated the sort of unknown costs to date for our sewer upgrade project. And also, with inflation as it is, are we going to be revisiting this? I see that we try to revisit it annually, but how are you feeling about the costs as they sit right now?
Well, the DCC bylaw is really a planning exercise, so it's really, it's looking at potential projects based on projected growth, and it's kind of it's not an engineered exercise, but it's a best guess as far as, some engineered estimates and coming up with the actual cost charges for each area. So, I guess to answer your question, I think we included enough. I think if I look in I have to look in the background report, but I think we used like a figure of 16 million for the water treatment plant upgrades. Now that can't all be attributed to that because we get grant funding that has to be discounted, but at the end of the day, a lot of these numbers are going to change, and yes, there's going to be inflation, so probably a more frequent review than 10 years is required. And I actually see, through the Bevan Road servicing work study we're going to undertake and some other stuff, that we'll probably have to come back and review the bylaw in the near future. So yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
These projects are projected over 20 years, so it takes a lot of time for some of these projects for us to actually collect the full value, right? So.
Anyone else have any questions? No. I was really excited to read the projects and the amount of work that's entailed in some of them, because it does make sense to do a lot of the work, and it's going to fix a lot of the problems that we have. And so that was great to see. I was really surprised that some of the other communities, and do you know if they're in the process of updating their DCs? Because if they're not, they're going to be really caught.
Yeah, it's tricky for the village because we have, we're a fast-growing community. We have old infrastructure, and we're trying to do a lot of it on our own. So, our DCCs are quite a bit higher than the other communities. More population, more development to contribute to those projects. So, I don't know where some of them are at. Some of them are more recently updated DCC bylaws, and some of them are probably due for review, but I couldn't really tell you.
Yeah,
And-
the inflation of doing a project is huge, the
Yeah.
cost. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for bringing it forward.
You're welcome.
Okay, council?
So, I recommend that council give first, second and third reading to Development Cost Charge Bylaw number 1173, 2022, and that council directs staff to refer the DCC background report by Urban Systems dated July 21st, 2022, to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs for approval by the Inspector of Municipalities.
Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have no new business, notice motions and announcements. Accessibility and Inclusion Committee, August the 15th at 3 p.m. Heritage Committee, Monday, August the 15th at 5 p.m. Homelessness and Affordability Committee, Wednesday, August 17th at 9:30 a.m. Committee of the Whole, Tuesday, September the 6th, 2022 at 2 p.m. And regular council meeting, Tuesday, September the 6th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. Then now we're in question period. If anybody has any questions, please email to info@cumberland.ca using subject line question period. Well, council, that was very good. Actually, I'm surprised at the time. It's been a long day.
We're we in a time warp?
It just amazes me the number, how much staff work has been done for this council meeting. The reports, they're huge, they're well done, well researched, and yeah, it's wonderful to be here, sitting here, and seeing this done. Thank you.
We've come a long way, baby.
Yep, that agenda ticked a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sure does.
There are no questions, Mayor Baird.
Thank you very much. We're going into the closed portion.
Move that council close the meeting to the public pursuant to Section 90 of the Community Charter to consider labor relations and other employee relations.
Second. All in favor? Carried. Motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, staff.